Bienvenidos a Launch Today. Our multilingual guest, Alberto Mujica, is on here today. Don't worry, I'm not going to try any more Spanish. I've since forgotten all of it. But Launch Today is the podcast focused on what it takes to get your new business to $1 million in revenue, from marketing tactics to incredible guest interviews. We focus on sharing behind-the-scenes insight from masters in their field. If you want to grow your revenue for your startup or your business, you don't want to miss today, because Alberto is a master legal mind who's helped dozens of companies with the legal side of launching and scaling, and he comes at it from a very unusual angle, the computer science one. A lawyer who used to write code. That is not a usual career path, but that's what Alberto Mujica, is that correct?
Mujica.
Mujica.
Yeah.
Accent
So
on the
you
wrong
got you got it
syllable.
close. Yeah.
Alberto Mujica, the managing partner of Scale Up Legal, used to do. Now he's an entrepreneur and investor and somebody who helps early stage companies master their legal compliance as they grow. It might not sound like the most captivating topic to cover, but getting early stuff like name, branding, and product terms of service wrong can sink your brand before you start. And also, Alberto's a pretty interesting guy, so even if the subject matter might sound a little dry, I promise he'll keep your attention. Let's learn from Alberto on what you need to make sure you get right out of the gate. I think the first question I have to ask you, Alberto, is used to be computer science, now lawyer. How the heck did that happen?
I asked myself that too. But first of all, thank you, man. It's great to be here. A lot of people you'll see that end up becoming lawyers, but started in the sciences, often are in the sciences for a very short period, which is not my case. I was a systems engineer and a data scientist for about a decade and a half, about 15 or so years.
Yeah.
So a long time. I did get to write a lot of code, but I did focus on a lot of data. I had a remote IT infrastructure uh, business based on my skills as a systems engineer and data scientist. So I started that business, and what was involved, what it took, uh, the litigation involved. I spent, running a business as I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees on things, and so ultimately going through that experience really got me interested in the legal side, especially and where it overlaps with technology, and that often happens in the area of intellectual property. So I figured that I'm going in the area of intellectual property because this is really interesting. I found it fascinating. And so I ended up saying, you know what? I'll go to law school. Man, three law degrees later,
3 law
here I am.
degrees. What, you had to catch them all?
Well, the thing is, I ended up becoming because privacy law was evolving in Europe. I was very interested in that, so I became a lawyer in Spain. So I got my JD here in Florida at Nova. At the University of Barcelona. I spent a couple of years over there and got my law degree over there. And the third degree is from UC Berkeley, specializing in IP and technology and law and venture capital. So,
Interesting. Barcelona is one of
yeah,
my absolute favorite cities in the world. So spending a couple
same
years
here.
there getting a law degree doesn't sound like that bad a thing.
It was not.
Me
It
with
was
all my
not. I
books in the
love it.
background here, I look like I'm cosplaying as a lawyer too. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Super interesting. With a specialty in venture capital, with a specialty in IP, tell me something about startup, like legal risk for early stage, that founders just don't think about and you think they really should.
There's a few. The thing is not that a lot of these risks are very small, but they're very easy to prevent or to mitigate, right? I see a lot of people start off and not have the right type of entity, for example. I see a lot of people start off and not go through trademark registration. And the thing is, having the right entity is important for tax reasons. It's important for liability. And it doesn't cost a lot to set one up. So when it comes to if you have a corporation, what type of corporation, or do you want an LLC? these are really important, and they 90% of the 90% of the situations, everything's going to be fine. And whether you pick the right one or the wrong isn't going to necessarily destroy your business or cost you a lot of money, or but in those cases where it matters a lot, and it costs very little to get it right.
Right.
But so it's something that can be very costly, and it costs very little to get it right. A lot of people can go to these. They can go on their own to the secretaries of state and register their own business, or they can go to a simple do-it-yourself website or legal service and set them up. Those places have their value. If you know what you're doing, you should be able to go and do it yourself. The value of doing it with an attorney when you're not yourself knowledgeable on the subject is that time that we spend understanding what you need, understanding what you want to do, and then telling you, okay, this is the right type of entity, for example, and this or is registered in Delaware or registered in Florida or California or New York, or register in Delaware and California. That's really the value of speaking to someone that knows about the topic versus going and doing it yourself. And the difference in cost is also very small, and can make a gigantic difference in how you protect yourself, your business, and that's just on the entity side. So not the brand, right? The brand's a big one. I, in particular, really enjoy trademark law. It's one of my favorite areas of law. And when it comes to branding, really, registering your trademark is trivial. It's trivial. I've had the regret. I've had all sorts of clients, some that come early, some that come late in the process. And I've had situations where clients of mine come to me and they've already spent thousands and thousands of dollars developing a product, developing a brand, packaging, you name it, only to find that we cannot use that brand. If you use that brand, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and you're going to find yourself for years litigating this issue. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in attorney's fees and lots of other things. So
Meta just got into trouble with Threads? There's some brand in the EU that has 11-year operating history called Threads.
It's terrible that I'm not familiar with this case.
I think it's just now going to court. It's just now going to court, but it was So Threads, of course, is their Twitter ripoff. Sorry.
Right.
Their goodness nude feed product, whatever you want to call it. They basically saw Elon Musk was shooting himself in the head, and they went, "We'll take some of that."
Right.
And apparently put no thought whatsoever into the name, because they're now being sued in the EU because there's a well-established business there being like, "WTF, guys? We've been right here."
But that's some of the things about the trademarks, right? Are they? Because I'm familiar with the Meta Threads, but I'm not familiar with the European one, because trademarks are very jurisdictional. The fact that you have that, let's say, not even in the EU, but let's say, hypothetically, because I don't know the specifics of the case, let's say this is a brand that, or very popular, or is only registered in, let's say, Poland or Germany alone, or Spain. Well, that doesn't mean that they have the right to that trademark across the EU or across the globe, or in the U.S. The same thing applies here. You may have a brand which may be very well known in California or in Florida, or even in portions of these states, and someone else goes and registers your brand before your national expansion or your statewide expansion of your business. And because someone else registered that brand before you with the Patent and Trademark Office, you end up having to limit the use of that brand to your existing geographic location. That's not to mention the issues with going through litigation to even define that scope. But the reality is the difference between that limitation, that issue, and being able to own your brand and use it nationally could have been a $2,000 expense,
Yeah.
which is trivial considering the implications.
And particularly
You know?
given I've been seeing recently entrepreneurs talking about how they'll get into kind of BS civil lawsuits with large organizations. And the large organization will say, hey, we're subpoenaing all your communications from the last year as part of the civil
Right.
lawsuit. And then you have to pay like $1 million to a third party to go through all of this and pull out just the relevant parts. And then the big organization will say, look, you can settle for $150,000 or you can pay $1 million just in these fees.
Right.
We don't care either way. We'll pay the money. We don't need the $150K. We'll pay the $1 million. It's fine. But settle, give us right. There are some copyright troll type people, like legal trolls out there who are doing that.
Yeah.
Where if you had good protection, you like, hey, we own the copyright globally. You can't. There's no need for discovery. I've got the grant. It's mine. Kiss off, right? That $2,000 expense can save you literal millions.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the most valuable benefits of trademark registration, that you walk in and they have the burden of proof to prove that you don't own that brand.
Yeah.
So you walk in with the advantage into court if you have if you've registered your brand.
Yeah.
It's a really important thing, and it's not expensive, and it's a simple process. And like I said, and if you encounter problems in the registration process, the earlier you encounter those problems and address them, the better.
Yeah.
Because then you end up developing a brand or attempting to develop a brand, packaging, design, whatever, and then you got to throw that out to start anew or engage in a prolonged and incredibly expensive legal battle. So neither of the two options are good.
Yeah, and one of the truisms of business that I know is once the lawyers get involved, nobody wins but the lawyers.
I wish that were true, but yeah, we tried to make it
Just because it is very rarely, unless you're a very, very large business, it's very rare where the expense of the legal work that you were about to incur is worth it. Never mind, just like the
Right.
emotional, all this stuff. Now, there are times when you must. I mean, you absolutely must. But that is more about protecting copyright. Or if someone stiffs you for $8K, I've had plenty of clients who just don't pay an $8K invoice. And I'm like, I guess you get to, because I'm going to lose more than $8K enforcing it. Just let it go. If it's $1 million invoice, okay, now it's worth chasing somebody for. So,
But that's my lesson in what, going back to your first question, how did I end up in law,
yeah.
is my experience as a business owner. And like I told you, I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees as a business owner. And my experience was, and I know this may sound a little self-serving, but for every dollar I spent on an attorney, it either saved me 10 or made me 10.
There you go.
Okay? The sooner I engaged an attorney, the more I saved, or the more money I made. So that really up to everything that we're talking about. If you engage an attorney early, your costs, your risks are gonna be minimized in the long term. And a lot of what I find, and that's one of the reasons why we've developed the programs that we've developed.
Yeah.
But a lot of people fear using an attorney early because they presume the expense is going to be out of this world, and you can. There are solutions, right, to get an affordable representation, especially early on in your business, that will save you a lot in the end.
I think that's a really important part of this, right? That business truism, right? Only person who wins in a lawsuit are the lawyers. There's one caveat there that I think people don't pay attention to, which is if you did it right up front, then your legal costs go way down.
Way down.
Because you have
Way
everything
down.
where someone sues you and you go, yes, but. It's like having a Uno reverse card. You go, great, boom, prove to me this is something worth my time, and then they can't. And so that's why, that's why I wanted to talk to you. A lot of founders I talk to also, they reach Series A, and they've still got rocket lawyer contracts. And
Right.
it's like, oh, the
Yeah.
couple of thousand you put into your terms of service now means someone can't come grief you with a spurious lawsuit where you'll spend $150,000 to settle it because it's cheaper. They will file one, and you'll play your Uno reverse card, and they'll walk away with their tail between their legs. So
Right.
that is really why, like a lot of founders these days, I'm not as guilty as many because my father's a lawyer, so like I got all this that I've done, hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully right the first time. A lot of founders go and don't understand. It's like you wouldn't drive a car without insurance, one, because you cannot, but two, because it's a high value asset that is at risk. And if you think of your business as the highest value asset you own, and if you are not properly shielding it from risk, it's like driving a car with, no seatbelt and no insurance and being like, I hope no one's drunk on the road. So being
Exactly.
smart about it up front is tremendously so much better. So you mentioned there are ways to be affordable, to not be spending $50,000 on incorporation or whatever nonsense crazy fees. I think that brings up something interesting about what you do, right? Because you don't just do legal work. You also invest in a lot of the companies you work with. And I think you come with a really unusual perspective. Most VCs come from finance. You come as a former systems engineer and as a lawyer. What do you look at that makes you say, I'm going to bet on this company? They're doing something really interesting. What are your qualifications there?
First of all, it has to be post-revenue. So even if it's a little bit of revenue, you have to be making some revenue. It has to be scalable. That these are some of the same things that uh, most investors look at, right? It has to be scale. You have to be able to scale. You have to look at the team. The team has to have some experience and has to show that. And if they don't have experience, you got to see that they're capable. And these are judgment calls, and they're always difficult. But also, you have to believe in the business is capable of at least returning 5 to 10x. That's also a judgment call, right? All of these things, and as anyone that invests will attest to, you're going to lose a lot of the times, but you just got to win a few times to cover those losses.
Yep.
So hard things, there's got to be some revenue. It's got to be scalable, and because of my background in technology and data, I tend to understand high-tech businesses very well, even if I don't know all because technology changes, but so much. Right now, I would have a hard time writing code. But first of all, I can understand code, even if it's brand new code of a language I have never used. Data, I can understand data structures extremely well. I tend to lean toward those businesses where I understand best. That I understand best. But I won't limit myself only to those.
Okay.
But as long as it's a solid business, meaning it scales, there's revenue, it's got a solid team, and we believe in the business itself, then we're willing to invest in them through our law firm and help them get to the next level.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So, understanding of data, understanding of kind of some of the core tech that powers these businesses, and you've been building over years, you've been building your own business, a couple different ones. If you were to give a founder a piece of advice, right, I've got a cool tech idea, I'm trying to build it, other than get your legal representation sorted early, of course, that's a given. What is it that you say, as an experienced entrepreneur and founder yourself, what is it that people need to do early to increase their chances of their new idea being successful?
Market validation, I think.
That's a good one.
And I think that you're even better at that than I am to answer this question. But being an entrepreneur myself, and I have my own. So my law firm is not just legal work; it's a business as
Yeah,
well.
of course.
And as a firm, in addition to my prior businesses, it's always market validation. Does this make sense? Do people want this? Do people not want this? So which part of this they don't like? Which part do they like? Well, this is selling like hotcakes. Why? Let's make more of those.
Yeah.
So I think market validation is extremely important, and doing it early, even if imperfect. I remember early when I was actually doing my business. This is, I would say, late 2000s
Okay.
or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you can see, the white hair.
Hey, you can't see mine, but it's going that way too.
um, and um, and I was given the advice, even if it's imperfect, get it out there. Get it out there, and because whatever you're putting out there is not going to be perfect. So just get it out there and start getting feedback from your potential clients, and also you might even generate revenue, which is good. So I see a lot of founders getting stuck on on trying to make this thing perfect, when in fact, no, just get it out there. It's go through the next iteration. It's okay. It's okay. We didn't. Let's say Windows wasn't. We've got the first time I used Windows was a Windows
3.1.
3.5.
Yeah, the first
So
one. Me
yeah.
too.
So I mean, it's come a long way. Don't look for perfection. Don't let perfection become the enemy of the good. So I would say go out there, go through the iterations, get market validation. That's more important on the business side. Obviously, there's the legal side. You protect yourself, set up a corporation. Before you start selling, make sure you set up a corporation. Limit your own liability. If you start getting traction, don't wait too long before you register your brand, because businesses. So these are the things, right? Businesses either have an invention, right? Something extremely unique that they spent a lot of time developing or whatever it is, that's protected by patents. You've developed a very unique thing, a Mickey Mouse, right? Or a movie, or you, that asset is, you protect it using copyright, which is a little lighter protection than patents, but it's way longer. Patents last 20 years, trademarks about, depending on the case, but about 70 years. 70 years after your death.
Yeah.
And then finally, and then trademarks. What's very cool about trademarks is that what trademarks protect is your traction, which is something that investors really look for. You have traction. The way to protect your traction is through your brand. Your brand is protected with a trademark. So
Gotcha.
that's
Excellent.
That's my take on those
All
things.
right. So definitely some good thoughts there. I definitely agree. Early stage market validation. That's Crowd Tamer's raison d'etre. It's why we're here.
Exactly.
And it is the sooner you find out what you're doing wrong, because you're doing something wrong. That's the whole, you don't know when you launch. The sooner
We
you
all
find it out
are.
and then pivot, the better off you are. And keeping in mind that what works one year may very well not work the next as well. Crowd Tamers is a great example of that. I did pretty good my first year, really well my second year as an agency. And then this year, my third year, the first half of the year, I did super badly. Because what worked the second year in 2022 wasn't working in the first half of 2023. It took me 6 months to realize, oh no, this isn't a blip in my revenue going down. This is my revenue is headed towards the San Marianas Trench. I better find a way to pull up. Iterate often, iterate early, but don't stop. Right? That's a big part of making sure you succeed. Is once you think you've got it made, it's easy to just say, "Great, I'm done. I've solved it." No, the market will move if you don't watch it. So, all good points, though. And I do agree, brand protection, all those things are important to have as well, because once you're making even a little bit of money, it's easy for someone to say, "Oh, I can make use of this brand myself," and then you will regret it. So great. Switching tracks.
And
Sorry. Go ahead.
no, to add to that last point that you made, remember, if your business fails or begins to fail, nobody cares about suing you. Nobody cares about all of this matters only if you
Yeah.
succeed, because that's when people are going to try to imitate you. That's when people are going to try to sue you and take your money. That's when people are going to try to abuse you in various ways, as we know. So these things that you're setting up on the legal realm are there to protect your success.
Yeah.
Because if you fail,
If you fail, no
nobody
one
cares
cares.
what you got.
What is the
But,
success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. There you go.
oh, exactly.
So let me ask you then on a little bit different tack, right? Have you read a really good book recently?
The last book I read, and it's been a couple months since I've picked up a book. Uh, but the last book I read was Codebreaker,
Okay.
uh, which looks at the story of
Turing, wasn't it?
no, Jesus Christ, she just got the Nobel Prize in chemistry for CRISPR.
Oh, Watson.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, the Berkeley alum, Doudna. Thank you very much. Yes, Jennifer Doudna.
Gotcha.
So it's a great book. I enjoyed every bit of it. Uh, my girlfriend is a PhD in neuroscience, and I see her always struggling with publishing papers and stuff, and the reviewers and the peer review and the authorship and all of these issues. And it's something that I'm a data scientist, but so I haven't done, but so it's data science, but it's not neuroscience.
Right. Yeah.
Having to publish paper,
Yeah.
it's never been. But so seeing her go through that, reading this book was really fascinating. It helped me put a lot of what my girlfriend does into perspective, and seeing what my girlfriend goes through helps me understand the book better as well.
Gotcha.
So it was very cool.
Super cool.
Very good book, and I enjoyed it.
Awesome. So that's a good recommendation. I see it was Best Book of 2021 by Bloomberg Business Week. So that's pretty strong. I had not heard of it. I'll check it out. My wife was earning her doctorate in nanomolecular microbiology when COVID hit, and then she had to stay home with all three kids for a year and a half, which kind of, oops, never mind. I guess that's not happening anymore. But she was well on her way. She finished everything. All she had to do was finish her doctoral paper, and just finding the time for it. With three kids in the house for 18 months was hard no.
Yeah, no, not easy.
Yeah, not easy.
Not
and
easy.
Twins, right? The twins were two, not even. Twins were 18 months old. So just impossible. Whatever. I launched Crowd Tamers as the agency then, and built my humble abode, my office in the backyard at the same time too. All right. So let me ask you then. You had a panoply of experiences over the years. If somebody opened a wormhole in time to you at 20 years old and you could shout through it, what would you say? You've only got a minute to say something to 20-year-old Alberto.
Only a minute. I would say don't worry about it. Keep at it. I remember I look back, to be honest, at my 20-year-old self, and I had my first son when I have a son and a daughter. My son when I was 22. And so he was born when I was 22. When I was 21, I was pregnant. So that was a source of a lot of stress. Yeah. And now I look back and I think, you know what? It is how it should have been, because at this point, I don't want to have little kids. My son's in the Air Force. He's doing it. My daughter's 17 years old. And I'm glad that they're that age right now. For different people, it's different, but for me, it worked out. And so one of the things that I would tell myself is, you know what, relax. It's gonna be fine.
It'll be okay. That's pretty cool.
Because another thing, and I tell this to my daughter too. I was much more strict with my son than I was with my daughter, and I explained that to my daughter. I'm like, look, you got the easy me, okay? And because part of it is you grow through it, and you realize they're gonna be fine. It's a good kid. You did your part. And there's a study, a long-term study that was conducted by Harvard. I, I don't remember the authors or when, but it wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that says parenting is has as much influence on your children as the flap of a butterfly wing in Africa has on a hurricane.
Very
Of
little.
course, very little. Ultimately, obviously, there's that's hyperbolic, but but yeah, ultimately, if you do some of the basic stuff and you're not abusive and all these things, your kids will grow up to be their own people and they'll do fine. So I'm far more relaxed about it nowadays
Gotcha.
than I was when my was first born. So
Yeah, I think that the younger child always gets it easier. The first child, the parent has to figure out the rules. By the second child, they're like, I don't care anymore. Whatever, it's fine.
it's like those iterations that we were talking about business, right? The second time you're like realizing, no, people are okay with you making mistakes as long as you keep running your business and you're responsible and you're so so go out there. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Go out there. Try that next iteration. Make sure you get something out there and potentially generate revenue. Start your business. Put your product out there.
I like that.
That's the entrepreneurial advice I would give, and I would give that same advice to myself. When I was 20.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to tell your son, listen, you're alpha version. Okay, you were first released. We could do better. That's what your sister is. I'm sure that'll work. We'll send him this clip, and he'll be like, "Yeah, thanks, Dad."
Yeah.
All right. What kind of entrepreneur, what kind of founder do you like to talk to at Scale Up? Like, who interests you as somebody like, hey, this is a good person for Scale Up to be having a conversation with?
To me, it's very important that they be coachable. When the founder is a know-it-all, it's because as we've reiterated here several times, we don't know everything, right? And all we can do is keep trying and iterating through versions. And when you interact with the founder that thinks he knows it all, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign because those are the ones that are going to try to make it perfect, not make it perfect, not release anything, and end up failing, or be at odds with the people that are trying to help them succeed. And bumping heads with your advisors and bumping heads with your team is obviously non-productive.
Yeah,
so
that is.
Those are things that I.
That's interesting. I was definitely, when I was younger, I think I was more guilty of being that know-it-all. I think a lot of people, when they're younger, they got a bigger chip on their shoulder. And as you get older, you're like, yeah, don't worry so much, man. Take it easy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, obviously, same here. This comes with experience, right? I thought I knew it all when I was 15.
Yes. Yeah. When you're 15, you're like, I'm an adult. I'm totally an adult. I'm a complete adult. Why would anybody insist I can't make all my own decisions? And then by the time you're 30, you're like, thank goodness I wasn't allowed to make all my own decisions.
Yes, exactly.
That face tattoo really wouldn't have gone over well. Whatever.
Absolutely. So yeah, I would say that's a tough thing to overcome, but ultimately, that's going to be a red flag for me.
Gotcha.
When it comes to a business.
Gotcha. Okay. Somebody listens to you talk here on this podcast. They go, Alberto, he knows his stuff. I'd love to know more. How do I find you on the internet?
Thank you for the plug. The website is scaleup.legal, SCALEUP.legal. And you're welcome to email me, AM, as in Alberto Mujica, at scaleup.legal. Yeah, it's easy to get in touch with us. We're not. It's one of the advantages. I think I've in these hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees that I spent as a business owner. One of the things that I learned is, unless you are Microsoft or Adobe or Johnson and Johnson or Pfizer, there's very little value going with these gigantic law firms because they're very expensive, but they do provide a certain very special value that smaller firms may not. But for smaller business, for startups, I think it's pretty important to have a more nimble law firm that can adjust to you, that you can pick up the phone and call, and that's more where we are.
Gotcha.
So,
All righty. Any last thoughts you want to tie the episode up with a bow?
I mean, I like to think that what I do for businesses is what doctors do or should recommend you do, and you should listen when they do. They tell you eat well, exercise, don't eat junk food, whatever other thing. Dealing with an attorney early on is that. It's having the discipline of spending less before to prevent further risk or liability in the future. So that's the advice: eat well and exercise. And that means check in early with your lawyer, check in often, and so that your costs are actually less in the long run. You're better protected. Your business is better protected. And remember, your business is this really important thing that you're putting together that is going to change your life. And it may not be as expensive as you think it is. So that's what I would say.
Okay. I think a good way to think about this is being a founder, you are always playing against the odds, right? Most startups fail. Most new, like 90% of businesses don't make it to 3 years, but every founder who starts assumes they're one of the 10, right?
Of course.
And
as you should.
But then what's your odds of a lawsuit? Pretty low. But your odds of a lawsuit being low, all that means is you as a founder are guessing that you're going to hit the right side of every, like, of the survival split and the right side of the don't get sued split. And the longer you play the game, the higher that risk of the don't get sued split grows, and the more you regret having just assumed you had coverage back then. So play the percentage game. Sure, go ahead. If you launch, you think you're going to make it. I think if you listen to shows like Launch Today, you're more likely to make it. And
absolutely,
make sure you don't just assume that you won't hit the bad jackpot. It is really for a couple $1,000, which for any business that's operating at like any real scale, it's not much money. For a couple $1,000, you don't have to worry about in 5 years' time spending a couple $100,000 or more because of oops. And that's the same reason why, like, business owners have insurance. This is just another version of the same thing. So
absolutely
awesome.
And that's why people should work with you when it comes to marketing, because you were able to tie that up beautifully. But yeah, that's, you got it right on the money. It's it really is. For every dollar you spend, you either save or make 10. And so do it early so that you spend less and protect yourself in the long run.
Because it is, if you don't spend the money at the early stage of your business, at some point, it's a guarantee you will regret it.
Especially if you succeed.
If you succeed, yeah.
Because that's when people are gonna. Because that's where people are gonna try to.
And actually, even if you fail, because if you don't set up your vehicle right and all of your business's debts become your debts, you're going to be very unhappy indeed.
Absolutely, that too.
So,
yeah,
all righty.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the time this afternoon, Alberto. I appreciate getting a chance to chat with you. We are next up. We're going to be talking to pitch mistress and messaging expert Cindy Skelicki, who helps companies craft messages that stick across all mediums for Fortune 250 and for startups alike. If you want to stand out from the crowd, make sure you subscribe to the channel or follow on LinkedIn so you don't miss the next one. Thanks, everybody.